Okay, great. Okay, well, we have a lot of great people here to talk with us today and a lot of things to cover. So don't want to wait too long. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm Michael Elizabeth Sakis, the communication specialist here with the Colorado River team with the Department of Natural Resources. And so today's format, we're going to hear a quick update from Commissioner Mitchell on a couple important items. And then we're going to go straight into our panel, which is going to focus on what it means to be a Colorado River water user in a state like Colorado that's experiencing unprecedented drought, and what it means to have less water some years, being forced to use less water and taking cuts to your water supplies. So we have a great group of people here, and I'm going to introduce them a little bit later. But first, we're going to hear from Commissioner Mitchell.
Thank you for that, Michael. And I just a reminder that the purpose of these webinars is to provide a touch point with you all as Colorado's commissioner. You may recall these were all originally scheduled to check in with Colorado water users and other Colorado stakeholders, but I understand and have seen in the past we may have a broader audience, and I'm happy to have anyone join that's interested. Today, what we're focusing on is hydrologic shortages in the upper basin and specifically within Colorado, across Colorado. So for many of our downstream neighbors and even for some Coloradans, the hydrologic cycle is not intuitive. But we live and respond to Mother Nature. Our water users are dependent on snowpack. It is their reservoir. So when we do not have sufficient snowpack, our water users have to take painful shortages to their water supplies. We take cuts in the upper basin in response to Mother Nature, and those shortages aren't voluntary, nor are they compensated. The shortages occur due to intrastate water rights management through strict priority administration. Before we move to today's panel, I wanted to quickly mention that Reclamation released the Consumptive Uses and Losses report late last week. The CUNL report illustrates all uses within the entire Colorado River Basin. It is supposed to be updated every 5 years. Until last week, the lower basin CUNL had not been updated since 2005. We now have data through 2015. While we won't dig into the details today, I want to highlight that based on our initial review, it confirms what we already know. It's largely consistent with our understanding of uses across the basin, demonstrated by this infographic. In terms of upper basin uses, the report confirms what we're here to discuss today. Our water uses are highly variable because our supplies are highly variable. We know water users across the upper basin have faced painful shortages nearly every year for the last 20 plus years. In fact, the shortages average 1.3 million acre feet per year, but this number is highly variable and can be much greater than this in some years. One example, upper basin water users use roughly 1 million acre feet less in 2021 than they did in 2020. We will continue to follow and incorporate the best available science into our decision making, which includes this new accounting of basin-wide uses. In the upper basin, we manage our supplies through strict priority water rights administration. We know how to adapt, and we do it every year, even when it hurts. And today, we have guests here to share what that looks like on the ground. Michael, our communication specialist, will moderate today's discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to her so we can get straight to our esteemed panelists.
Okay, great. Thanks, Commissioner Mitchell. And I do want to remind people that you can ask questions for our panelists. You can put those in the Q&A, and we'll probably have about 10 minutes for questions at the end here. So, and we ask that those questions be targeted to our panelists. Commissioner Mitchell will be here, but the questions today that we're going to focus on is for our panelists. So put those in the Q&A and we'll try to get to them at the end. So you've probably heard Commissioner Mitchell and other members of our Colorado River team talk about people taking cuts to their water supply in Colorado. That could be for two reasons. One, because of drought, the water simply isn't available. So there's nothing to take from the ditch, stream, or river. Or two, there isn't enough water available to go around. And that means staff from the Colorado Division of Water Resources are administering water rights. That means a senior water user has made a call and that junior user has to take less water or none at all. In both situations, that means people are taking uncompensated and involuntary cuts to their water supply. This is what we mean when we say people in Colorado are already feeling the pain of less water in the Colorado River. We want to start doing a better job of telling their stories so more people understand what that pain looks like. So today we've invited 4 people to talk with us about their experiences. I'm going to do a quick introduction of each. Hannah Cranor-Kersting is a rancher and the Gunnison County Extension Director in Gunnison, Colorado. Mike Camblin is a rancher and board president of the Maybell Irrigation District in Maybell, Colorado. Letitia Yazzie is Water Resource Director with the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe in Toyac, Colorado. And Ken Curtis is General Manager of the Dolores Water Conservancy District in Areola, Colorado. So thank you again so much to each of you for being here and for taking the time to tell your stories. And so my first question is for each of you, but Hannah, we're going to start with you. You have a combination of senior and junior water rights. But you told me that doesn't really matter if there isn't any water in the ditch. Can you tell us what drier years have been like for you when you have to take a cut to your water supply?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And so, like you said, we are at the end of a ditch, so it doesn't really matter what water rights we necessarily have or don't have. If there's no water in the ditch, it doesn't matter. We obviously can't take anything. So, as a kid, we've faced a lot of low water years. And now as an adult, now that I'm back on the ranch, I see that even more clearly than I did as a kid. But we have done everything from sold cattle, sacrificed hay meadow to run our cattle on our hay meadows rather than our pastures, buy hay. So we're kind of unique in that we previously only ran on the ranch, and so we hayed the interior part of our ranch and then rotationally grazed the exterior. And so in a low water year, we would decide, are we going to irrigate our pastures or a hay meadow? And what's more important right now? And can we sacrifice pasture ground to have more hay this winter, or do we need to, sacrifice the hay ground and possibly buy hay? So for us, it's kind of a balancing act of, if there's not enough water, we have to decide what gets irrigated. And then, as we might lose grass species. We obviously lose genetics every time we have to make a cut like that and sell cattle. So it has real impacts for us, and it's so variable. It's so hard to know year by year. If we go in, we think it's going to be a good snow year, and then, it could be really hot and dry like it is right now. And maybe the plan we had at the start of the year doesn't necessarily work now.
Yeah, thanks for that. Right. So it's like you said, you're at the end of a ditch. And so while you have something on paper, that doesn't really mean that will be your reality. And you have to make some really hard decisions each and every year, depending on the situation. Same question to you, Ken, in your position, serving water customers, what is it like to take a cut to your water supply? What's that like for you in that role?
Well, I'm the proverbial messenger, and so it's very unpleasant. As everybody does here in Colorado, we start watching the snow build up back in November. And when you see one of these bad years coming, 2021 being the worst, it's not getting better and you're not going to get saved. And I end up out there having these meetings, both with farmers and even the downstream fishery folks, and telling them there's not going to be any water to grow crops. And they're the ones that pay our salaries. They pay to operate this project. We have a staff of about 24 people. You do what you can, including cutting back on costs, personnel expenses. That's never well received by the internally, and then externally, folks are facing a real existential crisis on not knowing how they're going to pay their bills. If you're a young farmer, you might have loans out, and you're going to build on that loan and have to pay it back over the 10 more years. So they're very uncomfortable conversations. Everybody does understand it's the hydrology, not personal, but that old caveat about don't kill the messenger, it's really hard when you're talking about people's livelihoods. It affects people's lives, from the local commercial enterprises, maybe seeing a small impact, to people really having to rethink their whole financial situation. If they have a rainy day fund, it gives you another chance in a future year, but it's tough personal decisions. I could see that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ken. And right, having to, and I mean, of course, obviously you're a part of that community, so you feel that pain of your neighbors and the people you work with. Letitia, same question for you. You know, what is it like for you in Ute Mountain Ute when you have to take a cut to your water supply?
So I want to start with a little bit about the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. It's located in southwest Colorado, in the driest part of the state. The tribe has approximately 2,100 members, 600,000 acres reservation. The tribe has a 7,700 acre farm and ranch enterprise that has an allocation of 25,000 acre feet. When the farm and ranch enterprise doesn't receive its full allocation of water, it suffers economically. And we go back to that the prime example back in 2021 and 2022 of the drought years, when in 2021 the tribe only received a 10% allocation. In that 10%, 4% was only the tribe's allocation, and the rest of the 6% was leased water. And I'll go into the impacts further later on, but that's what I'll.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Mike, tell us your story. What is it like to deal with drier years when you have to take a cut to your water supply?
Yeah, so our story is pretty similar to everybody else's. That we irrigate out of the Maybell Irrigation District, but then we've also got water rights out of the Yampa River. The Yampa River actually runs right through the center of our ranch, and we've got both pre-compact and post-compact rights. 2021 was very hard for us. I think, like Ken said, being president of the Maybell Irrigation District, and then related to 3/4 of the valley. The first call is usually to me, and it's at 5 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock at night, and they're upset. They're mad. And if the water's not there, if it's not in the river, it doesn't matter if you have a post-compact right or a pre-compact right. The water is not there. It's gone. And it's devastating to these guys because it's tough to make money in ag, and when that water's not there, that is their moneymaker. They've got to produce hay or water livestock, and it's not a comfortable conversation to have with any of these people, much less our own family, and our own pocketbooks. So yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, Mike, so my next question is for you. You have about 30,000 acres with around 550 cattle, but those numbers have been hard to sustain when one year you have a lot of water and the next year you don't. And as you mentioned, some of your water rights are even pre-compact, which means that they predate the Colorado River Compact. And it's usually understood that pre-compact water rights are this untouchable thing, that you should be getting that water every year, but that hasn't been the case. And it sounds like those especially dry years have created a lot of anxiety for your community. And I've heard some people in the area were shutting off neighbors' head gates in the middle of the night so that water would flow downstream and that they could have water. Can you tell us more about that time for you and the difficult decisions that you had to make and what it was like being there, part of that community?
Yeah, I'll start with the people shutting the head gates off in the middle of the night. You know, I've sat on this board since April of 1999, so, you know, 25 and a half years. And we'd never seen that before. Normally, you know, we're a pretty tight knit community. And if somebody's short on water, you just, you know, you call them and say, hey, can I have a little water? And, you know, usually they're pretty compliant. In 2021, we had somebody sneaking around, you know, plugging head gates and shutting head gates off. And that's just, you know, goes to show you how panicky people get when they don't think that they're going to be able to make, you know, the bank payment or whatever. Personally for us, you know, we had a purebred operation, you know, we had registered Angus, and it was our pride and joy. I think the droughts that started in 2018, even though we had a drought plan, just like Hannah, we started destocking. 2019 was a good year, and then 2020, you know, it came back, and we just kept destocking and destocking. And by the time 2021 came along, you know, our drought plans just didn't go deep enough. It was we didn't have any grass, and then on top of that, we didn't have any hay. You know, we were looking at having to buy a couple $100,000 worth of hay, and we made the decision then, and it was a tough decision to make. You know, because my kids had cattle, my in-laws had cattle. We had a family meeting and made the decision to sell the whole thing, and we did. We sold every animal but 4, and they were show steers or show heifers that we had kept, you know, through the family, and we decided then that we had to start managing for grass, not cattle, and specifically for these drought events. And so we totally changed our operation. We now run yearlings, and it's a lot easier to make that decision. If you don't have the water, you put them on a truck and they go. You know, you don't have that emotion involved in it. And so that was a tough year for us.
Yeah, sounds like a really tough year. Yeah.
And we're still not up to full capacity. We've bumped our numbers quite a bit this year, but we are still seeing the effects. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. And my next question, you know, definitely related here for you, Letitia. The U Mountain Utes Farm and Ranch Enterprise was notably impacted by water shortages in that same year in 2021, when you were forced to take a 90% reduction in your water uses. Can you tell us about how that is still impacting the tribe today?
Yes, back in 2021, the tribe had to fallow 6,000 acres. And the years following that, you know, the tribe had to keep those fields for future production, and you know, tractor expenses, even just rototilling it all gets expensive. But luckily, in 2022, the tribe was able to receive a grant from reclamation to help cover those expenses, which was you know, most likely not going to happen again. And another talking about impacts, the tribe also has a bow and arrow corn mill and cattle herd. The corn mill had to purchase additional corn to keep its mills running. And then like what Mike mentioned, you know, the cattle herd, they had a you know, a high amount as 1,000 cow calf, and now it's only at 650. You know, during that time, the tribe also had to lay off half of its employees because it couldn't cover, you know, all those expenses. And while all of this is going on, you know, the tribe still has to pay the operation and maintenance fee of, you know, for the water. And, you know, that kind of help, led us to how we're going to negotiate future contracts on other waters. But those are a few of the impacts.
Right. It's like, if it's hard to grow things and make money, how do you keep up with those costs? How do you keep people employed? How do you keep the mill going? So, and, another question for you, Letitia, the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe is doing a lot of work to try to adapt, including attempts to grow more drought tolerant crops. Can you tell us about some of those efforts and why they're so important?
Really, it goes back to, the water supply. None of us know what it's going to be in the future. And how do we, for the tribe, agriculture and cattle, they're an important part of their livelihoods now, and how they, proceed. And alternative crops is one way towards that. And so the farm and ranch has been, experimenting with triticale, carenza, just different options, and seeing what kind of market is available. And even where the farm and ranch is exploring, how we can be involved in a CPP as well, conservation, because if there's no water, we have no way of making money for the tribe.
Yeah, and you often hear, the challenges around trying to grow new crops because, right, is there a market for it? How do you process it? So those efforts are really important, but they're incredibly challenging. They're incredibly expensive. And so, adapting is obviously pretty tough. And so my next question is for you, Ken. You manage the Dolores Water Conservancy District, which supplies water to users in the Southwest, including the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe. You were mentioning it a little bit earlier, and you were telling me that one year you went from excess water, having to let water out of McPhee Reservoir because there was just too much, to the next year not having enough water for all of your customers. And again, in this year that we're kind of talking about here, 2021, the southwestern corner was one of the hardest hit places in the state. As we just heard, the Ute Mountain Ute Tribe and others can only get 10% of that water supply. And you told me it's hard to grow anything on that. And you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but if you could dive into this a little bit more, like, what is that like for you to have to talk to customers, to work with customers, and to be a member of that community when those challenges are happening?
Yeah. Well, if nothing else, it's all hands on deck. It does unfold over time, given that we're watching snowpack and runoff, and it's a moving dynamic system. So one of the problems is you don't have precise and perfect information as the spring runoff all unfolds and the administration and priorities all sort themselves out. So in the end, both with our family farmers up north and the Ute farm particularly, you have lots of meetings and you start looking for flexibility. And these are just mitigation strategies, be they an alternative crop or a little bit flexible on how you deliver, or maybe how many people can get together and pool their limited water. You're having all these conversations, and all they do is limit the bleeding, because nobody's going to make money in a year like that. And as you pointed out, this project looked at the past, saw that there was a good, reliable supply. And since 2000, we've had 8 shortage years. And as you opened, we literally had 2019 filled up and let excess go downriver, stored as much as we could. And by 2020, we had to go into a small shortage, closer to 85%. And then with another bad year, led us into the 10% year. So we've definitely seen a change in hydrology since 2000. And that's just when the Ute farm was coming fully online and our family farms were coming online. So it's been a tough go. So it becomes a proverbial fire drill. You're mitigating the damage, but you can't stop all of it. And so you hopefully live to farm another day and claw your way back out, but it's not a quick go. As Letitia mentioned, there's a lot of fixed costs. One of the things we saw, everybody talks about alfalfa bouncing back. It does to some extent, but if you've had to leave it dry for 2 years, since you already cut back on one field, then you go into a 10%, you cut all the fields. Then 2022, a 40% supply, you can't bring them on. By that point, even alfalfa is not going to make it through. And so even when we had water in 2023, we could not use it all because, as Letitia pointed out, you had to bring all the fields back from scratch almost. And so that's just not doable in family operations or even with employees like the Ute Farm and Ranch. They had to rehire, retrain, get people out there and work the field. So we're still recovering from 2021. And even though we're going to eke out a full supply this year, two full supplies 2 years in a row, next year could take us right back, and we're not fully recovered. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a great segue into my next question, which is for Hannah. You shared with me that when you were a kid growing up on the ranch, you were sort of once oblivious to these anxieties around water. You have memories of your dad being forced to buy hay because he didn't have enough water to grow it. And your well would often go dry and you'd have to shower in town. But all of that felt normal. And now that you've taken on the family business, water is on your mind a lot, especially as you try to expand your business during times of this unprecedented drought and rising temperatures. And so, you told me that you're terrified for this upcoming irrigation season. Can you tell us why and what you're seeing on the ground that has you concerned right now?
Yeah, thanks. So like you mentioned, I think as a kid, it was pretty easy to be oblivious and to think that showering in town was cool and fun. And I thought my friends did that. And they didn't necessarily do that. And kids in neighboring counties that we, compete in high school sports against didn't necessarily do that either. So now as an adult, I see the stress and I understand now what my parents were going through that I was totally oblivious to. And I really am terrified for this upcoming irrigation season, and I think it kind of showed its head this weekend, even since we last talked. So we had like a pretty average snowpack here in the Gunnison Basin, and we went from it's literally snowed here 3 weeks ago to 90-degree days, and we have had record runoffs. So we've struggled a lot recently trying to get enough water, and like I said, we're the last in the ditch. So one big push for us has always been having the capacity to get our water right down to us. We're building infrastructure to try to handle these low water years. And then we just had record runoffs at, our rivers are running the highest they've ran in 5 years. And all of a sudden we're blowing out stuff. So we are, trying to, how do you manage this from record highs to, I fully expect by August to have record lows as fast as this is coming off. How do we build infrastructure that can handle that? It has to be able to handle the highest highs and the lowest lows. And those could span between each other in a month. It's just as, as things are getting warmer, we are seeing it just come off so much hotter, so much faster than it previously would. And then for us, I work full time off the ranch. And so there's a lot of stressors around being able to get water turned on early in the spring. And as we're going through drier winters and drier summers, our ground's just that much drier when we start. So really trying to balance, working a full-time job off the ranch and getting our water on and getting our fields irrigated so that our ranch can continue. And, like Mike said, we have a registered herd of Charolais cattle that I've been, much to my dad's dismay, we have been working on our genetics since I moved home from college. And so that thought of, are we going to have enough hay to feed them through the winter? And if I've been working on genetics for 10 years to maybe sell them all this fall, and like, I mean, we joke, but it's kind of not a joke of, is this worth it? Like, at what point do I say we have to stop investing in genetics because I cannot emotionally handle the roller coaster of working so hard to have a dry year and ship half my genetics that, that I've worked so hard to get. And, for me with my registered herd, I spend so much time working on, but, it's also an emotional attachment as well. So I think I am really scared for this summer. And I think this weekend was a kind of blaring, we spent all weekend working on the head gate. That's all we did was talk about water, think about water. And it's not exactly what I want to do every weekend. So it's tough.
Yeah. And I do want to follow up with another question. We talked a little bit about, your third generation rancher, and you and your husband are now taking over the family business, grandpa's ranch, parents' ranch, and, now the business that you're running, and how there's this legacy of knowledge around how to do things, but how quickly things have changed, especially in the last 20 plus years with rising temperatures and unprecedented drought, that, you want to stay in this, but you are having to really learn on the fly, figure out how to do things that maybe that like generational knowledge just isn't cutting it anymore. Can you share a little bit more about that perspective, trying to keep this going?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, like you said, it's really hard because what maybe worked for my grandpa and my dad doesn't necessarily work for us anymore. So my grandpa would not turn water onto the fields until June 1st. If we did that, we would be burning up. We would be so incredibly dry. So, what we've necessarily done in the past isn't working anymore. And a lot of our infrastructure is old. I mean, my grandpa put it in, some of our head gates are legitimately water heaters that he cut the top and the bottom off, and we put a head gate on. So we have all this infrastructure that's a certain age and all needs replaced at once. And then, it's hard, and we all get caught in this. That's what we've always done. And so I think it's hard, and it's hard as the new generation coming in, I'm a third generation. It's hard to come back and tell my dad, like, I think we should try to do this a different way. And like Letitia said, trying different seed mixes and thinking about things, a different way than we necessarily have in the past. And how do we handle there simply being less snowpack and less water in the river each year?
Yeah, thanks for that, Hannah. So my final question is for the group. It does feel like there's a constant sense of anxiety for what's to come next. And I'm sure that's really challenging to live with that. 1 year's a good water year. The next is a big, giant, fat question mark of what happens. And you're all having to make sacrifices. Could each of you take a moment to reflect on that and tell us what keeps you motivated to adapt? And maybe Hannah, we'll just start with you since you've been talking with us.
Sure. So I think kind of like what we already talked about, it's a family ranch. And so there's a huge stress that comes with that. And if I like plugging this, sorry, but there's a new movie that the Colorado Farm Bureau did that just highlights that there's almost a more stress because it is the family ranch and because they made a way to work for generations. Why can't we? And it's true in my own family. My grandpa worked full-time off the ranch and ranched, and he ran more cows than we did. And it's like, how? And it's mentally hard. And I think that's being reflected in people's mental health. And you don't want to let down. I mean, there's ranchers here in Gunnison, there are 5 generations. You don't want to let down 4 generations in front of you. But we're faced with such a different dynamic than they were. And how do we adapt, and how do we make sure our landscapes still are the same? And how do we keep these ranches as family ranches? And how do we keep, I mean, everybody is faced with the same thing. They're all family ranches. They're all very emotionally tied across all basins. So how do we all make sure that all of our family ranches stay in business, and that, we're here for the next generation, and we're providing quality food for our country. So I think it's really emotionally charged, and I think it's really reflected right now in mental health in farmers and ranchers. And I think it's really worth watching that video to kind of talks about these are even worse stressors because there is that family tie, and it's so much different than maybe, you know, kind of your standard business, because we're so emotionally invested in it, and it's so family oriented.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you have the ability, but if you want to share that link in the chat, if not, you can email it to me and I can do that too in a moment here.
Thanks.
And then, so Mike, for you, you know, what is it like having this question mark and, you know, having to kind of constantly be worried about what comes next?
You know, Hannah's absolutely right. You know, we're also third generation, and you don't, you know, there's such a real possibility that you could lose the ranch over water. And it is harder to make money because we don't have it. You know, my father-in-law was telling us yesterday about some of the gully washers they used to have, and he said, we haven't had a gully washer on this ranch in 35 years. And so, you know, things have changed. And we've been very, very progressive on the ranch, and then with the Maybell ditch, as far as making sure we can manage our water. We, you know, we got moisture sensors throughout the ranch, not only in our hay fields, but also in our range ground. We updated our pumps to be more efficient. You know, the Maybell Irrigation District spent $7 million on a new automated head gate, automated waste gates, check structures. I read an article the other day about, you know, how progressive California was with, you know, their water management and savings and so forth, and they challenged other states to follow their lead. I think what made me mad about that was that I would pit my ranch against any of them as far as our management, water management. You know, we did water leases on the ranch, and that water goes to them. And so it's not like we're not trying, by God. We're giving everything we got, and the reason we're doing that is so we can hang on to that family ranch. Yep.
Yeah, thanks for sharing the stories. And it's right. There's changes that everyone's kind of, you know, often being forced to make, and to infrastructure, to, like you mentioned, your drought plan, having to kind of look at that and, you know, figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work. And so, yeah, those are good adaptation things to know. Letitia, how about you? What is it like having this anxiety, not knowing what comes next?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, you know, the farm and ranch has to work with what water supply. It hasn't been innovative, and you talked about upgrading to infrastructure. You know, that's those are some of the things that the farm and ranch is currently doing right now. Looking at, you know, having a 1,000 acre feet reservoir. How, you know, we have to keep this going. You know, jobs for the tribal members and economic sovereignty is important to the tribe. And like I mentioned, their culture and their livelihood is in, you know, starting to, you know, on farming and ranching, and even the corn mill operation, keeping that going. Food sovereignty. So, you know, just looking towards the future, because for the tribe, you know, it's really for the younger generation. You'll hear Chairman Hart say that all the time. It's for the unborn ones. And so, you know, helping, I'm pretty sure all the tribal employees work towards that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then Ken, how about you to wrap us up here? What is it like living with this sense of anxiety, you know, for what's to come next when it comes to your available water supplies?
Well, it certainly gets tough at times. I guess ultimately, as you mentioned earlier, Michael, it's a community effort. We often hear about water providers, particularly in the larger cities, that think water comes from a tap. I will tell you, in these smaller communities, rural communities, even though we've got our small cities and towns around, it's right outside their door, and they're seeing it at the high school football games. They're seeing it at the golf course, maybe, or the Elks Club. Their neighbors are the ones that are getting hit on this, and likewise, the tribe saw it in the employment, the loss of herd. So the whole community's feeling it at some level, even though the producers like Mike and Hannah are taking it more personally. Um, Clearly, we're in this for the long haul. This project was built to support our community, and every drop of water within our district that's being drank or irrigated with comes out of our project. So people do realize we're all in this together, and the local cities put on their water conservation rules to try and help out. So I do think it's a team effort, and you do have to support yourselves. So you do want to be building your team for the long term, because if you let it get to you, it will. But it's certainly not easy, and you're not going to do it alone. You're going to do it with strong producers and strong community leaders. And of course, our board's made up of farmers, and they're feeling it. But you got to have leaders and work together, because it's tough.
Right. Community means a lot and is really important, I'm sure. And going through these struggles together. So Hannah, Mike, Ken, Letitia, thank you so much for these stories. And as Commissioner Mitchell said in the chat, really difficult stuff to talk about, to be honest about and open about. So I just really want to say thank you all so very much. So we are about to pivot to a Q&A with our panelists. So this is a time to add those questions to the Q&A. But before we jump in there, I just want to share just a couple reminders for folks. First of all, you can always find more information about the work that we're doing on the Commissioner's Corner, or by emailing any of us here. Here's a couple email addresses for you to contact us. And then this QR code here will take you to the Commissioner's Corner. So there's materials, infographics we use, we upload here, we share events that have happened or are going to occur, news events. And then also on that website, on the CWCB website, on the calendar, that's the place where you can see our next upcoming webinars. So these dates are always tentative because we do have a lot of things going on. So our next dates are for later this summer, and that's going to be July 11th and August 8th for those webinar dates. And again, you can find that information on the calendar that's on the CWCB website. So tentative, again, July 11th and August 8th, but we will be chatting about the Colorado River like we did here. So yeah, there you go. There's that information for you. And you can always reach out to me. My email is michael.sakis@state.co.us. Any feedback you want to share on these panels, any questions that you have. This was recorded, and so we will actually be hoping to repackage this as a podcast episode for our internal podcast called Water Talk. And yes, thank you so much for everyone who's joined us here. So we'll jump into questions. And right now we have one or two. So if anybody has any more that they want to ask, feel free. So this is going to be a question for the group here. What role does storage play in managing water supplies, and would additional storage help with shortage issues? And I don't know if anybody wants to jump in and start on that. Yeah, go for it, Ken.
The Dolores project does have about the third largest pool in the state of Colorado outside the big CRIS projects. So the big storage has been built thanks to reclamation and our forefathers. Small storage is another mitigation strategy. It will help. It's not the total solution. Bucket's a great way to capture it versus a traditional diversion off the river. When the river dries, you're done. But obviously the big reservoirs and the good sites have already been built. And so we are, as Letitia mentioned, the Mountain Ute Tribe is pursuing it and others are looking at it. But again, it's a small mitigation. The water's not there year to year. You just can't store enough with the hydrology we've seen since 2000. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to chime in on that question? Mike, looks like you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I can touch base on that. Yeah, so to me, a pool of water like that is just a great management tool. I think the problem is now is we're a little behind the 8 ball on a lot of that because, you know, it takes 30 years just to get, you know, the permits and the money and all that together. You know, Letitia and I both sat on the Colorado River Drought Task Force, and that was the number one thing that kept coming up in those meetings was how do we get more storage? And I know that there's a lot of animosity, you know, about people with reservoirs and so forth, but it's just a bank account. And it needs to be managed. You know, you just can't keep writing checks out of those bank accounts and not go broke. It's the same with these pools of water, but yeah, I'm a firm believer in them.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else? Anna, Letitia? Okay. And so our next question is for you, Hannah. You mentioned that recent movie about ranching in Colorado. What is the name of that movie? And I know you sent me a link earlier, and I was trying to dig through my email to find it.
No worries. It's called The Legacy, and it's on, I believe it's on the Colorado Farm Bureau's YouTube channel.
Great. Yes, here we go. You just resent it to me. Let me get it in the chat.
Thanks. I couldn't figure out how to put it in the chat.
Oh, no, don't worry about it. Let's
Thanks.
see. Yeah, of course. Everyone, there we go. Nope, that is not. Wait, yes, that is. Wait, what is that? What did I just send everybody? Is that it? Hang on. Looking with multiple screens here.
2023, the best way to make money on Amazon is not with physical products. It's Amazon's other company, Audible.
There we go. I think that works.
$8,000 to
And I'm going to
$10,000
immediately.
every single month in
Oh
passive
my
income.
gosh, there we go.
And I'm not the only one.
Go away, please add. Okay, great. Okay, thank you. There's that. And let's see. So, do you want to talk at all more about that movie at all, or what it's about, or why it means a lot to you?
Yeah, so it was a collaboration with the Colorado Department of Ag and Farm Bureau, and I believe Extension, and they just kind of talk about the mental health struggles in ag and how, you know, some of that's tied to the fact that it's a family business and the family aspect of it. So I definitely think it's worth the watch. It's kind of long, but it's really moving, and I think it kind of paints a picture of not just ag in Colorado, but ag all over the place, and how it's, you know, it's so tied, and people's mental health is so tied to the different, you know, to stressors outside of our control, the markets, water, stuff like that. So I think it's really worth the watch.
Okay, great. Yes. Good. I'm glad I got the right link in there. And so another question is, you know, what is the number one thing you would want folks in other states to understand about water use in Colorado? You know, what other advice would you give to other states trying to adapt to shortage, to have to live, you know, within the means of the river kind of year by year? Anyone want to take a stab? Yeah, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, one, we're still learning. The reality that Commissioner Mitchell has put out there about the climate and the changes we've seen the last 23 years, I think Colorado at some level is still adjusting to. 2002 was a bit of a wake-up call. I personally wasn't here in that year, but as I've looked back and experienced more recent droughts, like Mike was saying, none of the physical changes are going to happen overnight. They're going to take decades. And so we're still seeing projects that have their genesis back in the 2002 era, just finally starting to gain some traction, maybe in construction. So with that said, it's tough. You don't have the water, so you're going to have to look at other mitigation strategies. And as Mike and Hannah pointed out, at some point, it's how viable are things economically. I mean, and so we're trying to survive on an economic level, and crop switching and small reservoirs. They are viable strategies and they may carry us through, but there is no silver bullet. Maybe the worst part is the uncertainty. We can't plan next year for shortage or for a big release out of the Dolores project because none of us know what's coming next year. There is no certainty up here what's coming in the next 90 days other than we know the snow's done with. So yeah, the uncertainty level is different when you're relying on snowpack. But with that said, all you can do is make mitigation plans and keep practicing.
Thanks for that.
I'll touch on that one, Michael. I think the biggest thing is education. I think people get into a paradigm maybe a little bit, and they don't feel like they're the problem or whatever. And I think that's where you start. You look at what you can do to improve yourself and your ranch and your water management, and you look at other people that's done it and how that worked for them and just continue to get better. But I think education is going to be key on all this. Everybody says, well, agriculture is wasting water and so forth, but agriculture is really the key of what's going on in these rivers. The late season return flows that you get, not only helps the fish and the environment, but the water users, in Arizona and California. And so we're no different than what the beavers were 100 years ago. We just put hay up and they didn't. So I think education is going to be pertinent on this.
Yeah, thanks for that. Anna or Letitia?
Yeah, I'll speak. Probably the one takeaway from is, tribes, they're here. We're part of what's going on in Colorado. We can help, and like Mike said, just education, working with others, Dolores, we're, really doing the best that, doing the best that we can with what we have. And of course, staying informed in all these big river issues. I really want to give thanks to Commissioner Mitchell and the Colorado staff in keeping us informed of all these conversations with the tribe. So, not forgetting about the tribe is I think one good takeaway.
Appreciate that. Thanks. And Hannah, looked like you had unmuted as well.
Yeah. I would just, we're all in this together. I think, it's affecting all of us and it's everybody's family ranch. It's not just ours. So we have to find a way to work together so that we can all stay in business and that we can all continue these ranches that we've worked so hard to try and continue.
Thank you. And it looks like we only have time for one more question. So thank you all for adding questions to the Q&A, and sorry that we're not going to be able to get to all of them. But here's our last one, and this is for Ken and Letitia primarily. How have local collaborative efforts in the Dolores and San Juan basins mitigated against even worse adverse impacts to water supplies during severe drought years? and we have about 4 minutes to cover that pretty hefty topic, but we'd love to hear from both of you on that.
I guess I'll start. Obviously, we're looking at more flexibility. Hopefully, we can find a little bit of ways to maybe water share. There are senior rights in the area, and that's their right, and they're trying to make their own living. Since we do follow prior appropriation. But as Letitia had mentioned, we have shared some shares of those senior rights a little bit more flexibly. We're looking at the reservoirs. We're looking at the crop switching. We're also looking at fiscal or financial mitigation measures. That's one of the things we internally do is change our rate structure to support our family farms up north. With that said, it's hard to keep an organization with 24 staff and a large reclamation project operating when you're dipping into our fiscal reserves regularly. They've done some hydropower down at the Ute Farm and Ranch. Hopefully that adds a little bit extra into their pool of resources. The corn mill itself was a vertical integration to try and make them a more profitable operation. Hannah mentioned working off farm at a certain point. Many of our family farmers are full-time into ranching and farming. In drought years, they have taken jobs off the farm, but as she pointed out, that makes her weekends all about the head gate and whatnot. So we're certainly having a lot of conversations. I'm working with the Ute Farm and Ranch, and they're obviously looking at some of these opportunities, and we're talking about everything, like Mike said, from water management, from the district perspective to the on-farm perspective. So no, we haven't figured it all out. We don't have a perfect plan, but we're looking at all options. Thank you.
Thanks. And Letitia, did you want to wrap us up here? Do you have anything to add there?
No, I don't have anything to add. Ken really touched on everything already.
Okay. Well, look at us go. It is almost exactly 12:30. So thank you again all so much. And for everyone who joined today, really appreciate it. Obviously a very important conversation. And it was just a great opportunity to be able to get these folks in front of people who want to learn more about what these realities are like. So thank you all again. And we'll see you at our next webinar, July 11th. And again, reach out if you have any questions. So thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much.